This is a 1982 Schwinn SideWinder. The original owner of this bike was kind enough to let me resurrect this and bring it back to perfect working order. 1982 was the early days of mountain biking. The Schwinn SideWinder and the Specialized Stump Jumper both came out in the year 1982 as the first mass-produced mountain bikes. I think we can all agree that the Specialized Stump Jumper became a much more important bike in the history of mountain biking. But nonetheless, this was a really fun bike to work on and really, really cool little piece of history right here. So I would call this bike a survivor as opposed to a full restoration. I really believe that when working on these old bikes, you should keep the old paint intact and just embrace some of the patina and the scratches and the dings. It's only original once, so if you were to strip this bike down and paint over it, I think it would just lose a lot of the character. So most of this bike is original, but we did make a few upgrades. For one thing, I rebuilt these wheels with new stainless steel spokes and spoke nipples. The original wheel was actually damaged. This bike must have been in some sort of an accident. When I received the bike, there was a lot of damage to this rear dropout. The rear derailleur was tangled up into the spokes, and some of the spokes were even broken, so we went ahead and rebuilt the wheels. This front hub was originally gold, and the gold paint was flaking off of the hub. I was looking at a lot of pictures online of Schwinn SideWinders from the early 80s, 1982, 1983, and they all seemed to have the same issue. So I went ahead and just stripped the paint completely off of both hubs. And now they're silver, and I think they look pretty good. The other upgrade that we did to this bike were these microshift thumb shifters. This bike is a 10-speed. I mean, it's got 2 gears on the front chain ring and 5 speeds on the rear freewheel. When I received the bike, it had 7-speed index shifters installed. Now, index shifters are where you click, click, click through all of the gears, and since we had 7 clicks and only 5 gears, it was not working correct. So I went ahead and found these nice Microshift brand thumb shifters, which you can set to friction mode, meaning they do not click between gears. So with friction shifting, you just manually move the shifter back and forth and get it into gear just by feel. And that's the period correct way for this bike. So I got a lot of rust off of this bike, but when you get up close, you can still see some pitting and some remnants of the rust. That patina is just going to have to be part of the character of this bike going forward. To the best of my eye, the frame of this Sidewinder is virtually identical to a Schwinn Varsity, maybe even a Schwinn Continental. If you were to take the paint off of this bike and the paint off of a Schwinn Varsity, I don't think you'd be able to tell the two apart. Potentially the bottom bracket on the Sidewinder is a little bit more raised off the ground, but I'm not even sure about that. This freewheel has a granny gear, the very large gear on the back. That's definitely a difference from the Varsity. The drivetrain's slightly different. You wouldn't see that big of a range on a typical 10-speed. And it's worth mentioning that because of that large granny gear on the back, this bike requires 120 links in the chain. Most chains that I buy these days come with 116 links. So I did have to order a chain specifically with 120 links. And it just happened to be this nice, shiny silver. I think it really looks nice. There was one pretty major issue with this bike. It must have been in some sort of an accident at some point. This rear dropout was completely bent out of position to the point where the rear derailleur was actually tangled up in the spokes. There were broken spokes. There were bent spokes. and the dropout was bent so bad that you could not even mount the derailleur into the dropouts. When you removed the wheel, the derailleur just completely fell out. You can see that big gap in the dropout in this picture. And here's a quick clip of what I did to bend that dropout back into place. I used this piece of angle iron that I screwed onto the dropout, which gave me enough leverage to slowly just pull the dropout back into place. And amazingly, this worked perfectly on the first shot. There was a little bit of cleanup work to do. I actually used some Park Tool dropout alignment tools after this just to get everything back in alignment. You can see this is before I made the adjustments. They're way out of whack, but these tools made it really simple to bend everything back into position. And the final result was this derailleur in perfect alignment, vertical with the gears, allowing for perfect shifting. Couldn't have been happier with how that turned out. Kept the original pedals. They show a little bit of color, but they were completely serviceable. New ball bearings, new grease, and they're good to go for another 40 or 50 years. In fact, the entire bike was disassembled and degreased. I used degreasers and ultrasonic cleaner, get every speck of dirt and grease off the bike. Everything's got fresh grease, new ball bearings where appropriate, in perfect mechanical condition. Here's a shot of these Billy Bonkers tires. Clearly these are not original. This is a more modern tire, but it's got just a nice look that matches this bike, and they'll be great tires for cruising around town. Did replace the cables, yellow outer housing, same color as the original. Check out these BMX bars. That's very much in style these days to put BMX bars on 90s style mountain bikes. Typically, to put BMX bars on, you actually have to replace the stem and put a BMX stem on, because you can't slip the handlebars into the stem due to the top bar. But these bars, the top bar is pinched on the edge. And the reason they're pinched is that allows you to reuse the original quilled stem. That pinch will slide through the gap in the stem. So that's something to look for if you're trying to put a set of BMX bars on your original stem. You might look for a pair that the top bar is pinched on the edge. Funny story about this bike. I don't know what had happened to it. It must have been in some sort of an accident. But when I received it, the kickstand was completely missing, including the housing. This housing was completely off, and there was just a clamped on kickstand. So I searched and found a kickstand with housing from a guy actually in Poland, believe it or not, and had it shipped over here. And the owner of this bike is a skilled welder, and he was able to weld the housing on, and not only that, but match the paint, and did an absolutely amazing job, not only with the welding, but touch-up painting to get that to match. So there is a tiny bit of touch-up paint, but we were careful to leave the original SideWinder logo. The decals on the fork have been replaced. Those are brand new. I'd say they turned out looking pretty nice. With the bike upside down, you can hear how cool this original freewheel sounds. And there you have it, 1982 Schwinn SideWinder. Completely overhauled, back to perfect working order. Hopefully this guy will be on the road for another 40 or 50 years. Going to return this to its original owner. I think he'll be really pleased. These projects are so much fun for me. I don't know what it is, but something about taking something old and bringing it back to life, saving one bike from the landfill, less things thrown out, more things reused and recycled. Can't wait to find my next project.